This happened back in March of 2021, right after I turned 19 and got in my first real place. It was a tiny studio apartment in Duluth, Minnesota. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a roof over my head. The problem was, I'd moved in with basically nothing. I had a mattress on the floor, a folding table I'd borrowed from my mom, and an old TV someone had given me. That was it. No seating, no storage. Nothing that made the place feel like an actual home. Money was incredibly tight. I was working part-time at a grocery store and barely making rent, so buying furniture wasn't really an option. That's when I started scrolling through online marketplace groups, looking for anything cheap or preferably free. I must have spent hours every night after work, just refreshing the page, hoping something decent would pop up. After about 2 weeks of searching, I finally saw something promising. Someone had posted a love seat they were giving away for free. The photos weren't great, kind of blurry and taken from weird angles, but it looked serviceable. A little worn, maybe, with some fading on the fabric, but it had all its cushions and no obvious stains or tears. When you're sitting on the floor eating dinner every night, you're not exactly picky. I sent a message right away, trying not to sound too desperate even though I absolutely was. Within maybe 10 minutes, I got a response. The person, I never got a name, to just a generic profile with barely any information, said I could come grab it that same evening. They suggested 9 o'clock and included an address in their message. I copied the address and dropped it into my Maps app, expecting it to be somewhere across town or maybe in one of the suburbs. Instead, the pin dropped way outside the city limits, really far outside. The estimated drive time was 55 minutes, and when I zoomed out on the map, I could see the route took me deep into rural farmland, far from any main roads or populated areas. My first instinct was to say no. Something about it felt off. Why would someone be giving away furniture from such a remote location, and why so late at night? But then I looked around my empty apartment, thought about my bank account balance, convinced myself I was being paranoid. People who live in the country have furniture too, right? Maybe they just wanted it gone quickly. Maybe they worked during the day and evening was the only time they had available. I told myself I'd be fine. It was just a furniture pickup. People did this kind of thing all the time. I messaged back confirming I'd be there and started getting ready to leave. I left around 8 o'clock to give myself plenty of time. The sun had already set. It was early spring, so the days were still pretty short, and the temperature had dropped significantly. I remember turning the heat up in my car and pulling on an extra layer before heading out. The first 30 minutes of the drive were normal enough. I stayed on the highway, passing through the outer edges of town where the strip malls and housing developments gradually gave way to more space between buildings. But once I exited onto the county roads, things changed quickly. The streetlights disappeared, houses became few and far between, and then stopped appearing altogether. On both sides of the road, there was nothing but dense forest and the occasional field, all of it swallowed up by darkness. I kept checking my phone, watching the little blue dot on the map creep closer to the destination. The roads got narrower. At one point, the pavement ended entirely and turned to gravel. My tires crunched loudly over the loose stones, and I had to slow down to avoid kicking up too much dust. There were no other cars, no lights from distant houses, and nothing but my headlights cutting through the black. Finally, my phone announced I was approaching the destination. I slowed down even more, scanning the darkness for any sign of a building. Then I saw it. A structure set back from the road, maybe 50 yards, barely visible except for a single weak light mounted above a door. As I got closer, I realized it was an old barn, not the kind you see in pictures, all red paint and white trim. This was weathered and gray, one with wooden slats that looked like they were rotting in places. Some of the boards were missing entirely. I pulled up slowly and parked about 20 feet from the entrance, leaving my car pointed back toward the road. The engine ticked as it cooled. I sat there for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, trying to decide if I should actually go through with this. Everything in my gut was telling me this was wrong. Who gives away furniture from an abandoned-looking barn in the middle of nowhere? Why not from their house? But I'd driven almost an hour, and I really did need that love seat. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that my imagination was running wild because of the creepy setting. I'd just knock, help them load it into my car, and leave. 5 minutes, tops. I turned off the engine and got out. The cold hit me immediately, along with the silence. It was the kind of quiet you only get in truly isolated places. No traffic sounds, no distant voices, nothing. Just wind moving through the trees somewhere behind the barn. I walked up to the door and knocked 3 times. The sound seemed too loud. The door opened almost instantly, like someone had been standing right on the other side waiting for me. A man stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy canvas jacket and a black balaclava that covered his entire face except for his eyes. Just standing there, staring at me through that mask. For a second I couldn't process it. Why would someone wear a ski mask to give away furniture? It wasn't cold enough to justify it, and we were indoors, or about to be. "Come on in," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "I need a hand moving it from the back." He stepped aside slightly, gesturing for me to enter. But he didn't step back far enough for me to walk in comfortably. I'd have to squeeze past him, turn my back to him to get inside. Every alarm in my head started screaming. I hesitated, then leaned forward slightly, trying to see past him into the barn before committing to going inside. That's when I saw them. 2 more people, both men, standing just inside the doorway about 10 feet back. They weren't doing anything, not moving furniture, not preparing to help. Haya's standing there, perfectly still in the shadows, facing the door, facing me. Both of them were also wearing dark clothing and masks. They didn't say anything, didn't wave or acknowledge me at all. They just stood there, waiting. Something primal took over. I didn't think, didn't speak, didn't try to make an excuse or explain myself. I just turned and ran. I heard the gravel crunching under my feet, heard my own breathing, heard the barn door creak, but didn't look back to see if they were following. I yanked my car door open, threw myself inside, started the engine, and hit the gas all in what felt like one continuous motion. I drove way too fast down that gravel road, fishtailing slightly, rocks pinging against the undercarriage. I didn't slow down until I was back on paved roads with streetlights. Even then, I kept checking my rearview mirror for headlights that never came. When I finally got back to my apartment, I was shaking. I immediately went back to the Marketplace app to look at the listing again, maybe to report it or see if there was any information about who had posted it. But it was gone, completely deleted. The entire post had vanished, and when I tried to find the profile that had messaged me, it didn't exist anymore, like it had never been there at all. I never did get a couch from that Marketplace. Actually, I deleted the app entirely and ended up just saving money for a few months until I could afford to buy something from an actual store. It took a while, and I spent a lot of uncomfortable nights sitting on the floor, but it was worth it. I still think about that night sometimes, about what would have happened if I'd actually walked into that barn, if I turned my back on 3 masked men in the middle of nowhere, with no witnesses and no cell signal. I think about how quickly that door had opened, like they'd been watching me pull up, how they were just standing there, waiting, not even pretending to be moving furniture. I don't know what they were planning, and I'm grateful I never found out. To the 3 masked men in that barn outside Duluth, let's not meet ever again. This happened about 5 years back, during the summer after I just turned 17. I was desperate to make some cash of my own. You know how it is when you're a teenager and tired of asking your parents for money every time you want to do something with friends. I'd been working odd jobs here and there, but nothing consistent, so I figured I'd try selling some of my old stuff online. I started going through my room, pulling out things I didn't use anymore. Old video games, so action figures I'd collected as a kid, some vintage comic books my uncle had given me years ago, clothes that didn't fit, basically anything that might be worth a few bucks. I made accounts on a few different selling apps and started posting listings. For weeks I got almost nothing. A few lowball offers, some obvious scammers, people who'd message and then ghost me. It was frustrating as hell. Then one evening in late July, I got a notification on my phone. Someone had messaged me about one of my listings, a collection of vintage action figures from a popular sci-fi franchise. I'd had these things since I was maybe 10 or 11, kept them in pretty good condition in their original packaging. I was asking $80 for the whole set, which seemed fair based on what I'd seen others selling for. The message was straightforward enough. The guy said he was interested in the figures, and asked if they were still available. I checked out his profile before responding. I wasn't completely naive about internet safety. His account looked legitimate. He had a profile picture showing a middle-aged man, maybe in his late 40s, with a neatly trimmed beard and dark hair. His page showed he had over 300 friends, regular posts about sports and local events, photos of barbecues and family gatherings. Everything seemed normal, unremarkable even. We started chatting back and forth. So he told me he was looking for these specific figures because his nephew was a huge fan of the franchise and he wanted to get them as a birthday gift. It was a sweet story, and I had no reason to doubt it. We agreed on the price pretty quickly. He didn't even try to negotiate, which should have been my first hint that something was off. But at the time, I was just excited to finally make a sale. Then came the question of where to meet. He suggested I could come by his place, and gave me an address on the east side of town near Riverside. He said it would be more convenient, that he had a home office, and worked from there most days. Something about that suggestion made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Maybe it was all those warnings you hear growing up about meeting strangers from the internet. Whatever it was, I told him I'd prefer to meet somewhere public. He seemed fine with that, didn't push back or anything. We agreed to meet at the Westfield Shopping Center, right outside the main entrance by the fountain. It's a busy place, always crowded, which made me feel safer about the whole thing. We set it up for the following Saturday at 3 in the afternoon. Saturday came around, and I was actually feeling pretty good about it. I'd wrapped up the action figures carefully, put them in a bag, and was getting ready to head out around 2:30. Then my phone buzzed. It was him, so asking if we could push the meeting time back. He said something had come up with work, a client call that got scheduled last minute, and asked if we could meet at 9 p.m. instead, 9 at night. That immediately felt wrong. The shopping center would still be open, sure, but it would be darker, less crowded. I showed the message to my mom, and she definitely wasn't happy about it. She said if I was going to go through with it, my dad would drive me and wait in the parking lot. Honestly, I was relieved. I messaged the guy back and said 9 would work, but I was already feeling more anxious about the whole thing. The rest of the day dragged on. I kept checking my phone, half expecting him to cancel or change the time again. When evening finally came, my dad and I got in the car and drove to the shopping center. It was a 15-minute drive, and my dad spent most of it reminding me to stay alert, keep my phone on me, don't go anywhere that isn't public. I appreciated it, and even if it made me more nervous. We got there around 8:45. The parking lot was maybe half full, definitely less busy than it would have been earlier in the day. My dad parked near the main entrance where we'd agreed to meet, in a spot where he'd have a clear view of the fountain area. I told him I'd text him when the guy showed up. At 8:55, I got a message saying he was pulling in. I looked around but didn't see anyone approaching. Then another message came through with a description of his car. A dark blue sedan, he said. I spotted it pulling into a space maybe 30 feet away from where my dad was parked. That's when things started feeling really wrong. The guy who got out of the car didn't look anything like his profile picture. I mean, maybe it was him, but if so, he'd changed significantly. This person was completely bald, not a trace of the dark hair I'd seen in his photos. When he was wearing this oversized black jacket, despite it being a warm summer night, and even from a distance, something about his body language seemed off, twitchy almost. He kept looking around the parking lot in this scanning way that made my skin crawl. I was still sitting in my dad's car, watching. The man pulled out his phone, and a second later, mine buzzed. I'm here by the fountain, his message said, but he wasn't by the fountain. He was standing next to his car, still looking around. I didn't respond right away. I was trying to figure out what to do. My dad noticed my hesitation and asked what was wrong. I showed him the message, pointed out the guy by the blue sedan. My dad's expression darkened immediately. That's not right, he said. Why would he lie about where he is? Another message came through. Where are you? I don't see you. Then another, and almost immediately after, are you coming or what? I made a split-second decision and texted back that I was inside the shopping center, that I'd be out in a minute. I don't know why I lied. Maybe I was trying to buy time to figure out what to do, or maybe some instinct was telling me not to let him know exactly where I was. His response came fast. Come outside now, I'm waiting. The tone had shifted. It wasn't friendly anymore. I watched him through the car window. He was definitely getting agitated, pacing back and forth next to his car, constantly checking his phone. Then he started walking toward the entrance, his head swiveling around like he was searching for someone. My phone buzzed again. "Stop wasting my time and get out here, idiot." That word, idiot, it was like a switch flipped. Whatever benefit of the doubt I'd been giving this situation evaporated. This wasn't some nice guy buying action figures for his nephew. Something was very wrong here. I told my dad we needed to leave. He didn't argue, just started the car. As we pulled out of the parking spot, I saw the man's head snap in our direction. For just a moment, we made eye contact through the car window, and the look on his face. I can't really describe it, but it wasn't anger or frustration. It was something colder, more calculating. My dad drove us straight home. I was shaking in the passenger seat, and I immediately blocked the guy's account and deleted all our messages. And then I deactivated my entire selling account. Didn't even care about the other listings I had up. My parents were incredibly supportive, told me I'd done the right thing by trusting my instincts, but I still felt stupid for almost going through with it. I tried to put it out of my mind over the next few weeks, told myself it was just a weird situation, that maybe I'd overreacted, but then something happened that made my blood run cold. I was hanging out with my friend Marcus about a month later, and somehow the conversation turned to online selling experiences. I mentioned, kind of casually, that I had a creepy encounter trying to sell some action figures. Marcus's face went pale. He asked me to describe what happened, and as I did, he just kept nodding with this sick expression. Turns out, Marcus had gotten messages from someone. He was pretty sure it was the same person based on the profile details I described, about some collectible toys he'd listed. Same story. Buying them for a nephew, wanted to meet up, suggested meeting at night. Marcus had gotten a bad vibe and blocked the account before it went any further, but the coincidence was too specific to ignore. We did some digging, tried to find the profile again, but it had been deleted. We talked about reporting it to someone, but we didn't have much to go on. No crime had actually been committed, just a creepy feeling and some aggressive messages. To this day, I still don't know what that guy's actual intentions were. Maybe he really was just a socially awkward collector who happened to shave his head and had a bad temper. But I don't think so. The way he lied about his location, the way he changed his appearance from his photos, to the aggressive messages when I didn't immediately comply, it all adds up to something darker. I never tried selling anything online again. Some money just isn't worth the risk. Back in early 2019, I received a gaming laptop as a birthday present from my parents. Don't get me wrong, it was a thoughtful gift, and they'd spent good money on it, but the thing was basically useless for what I actually needed. The graphics card was outdated the moment it came out of the box, and trying to run anything more demanding than Minesweeper turned it into a space heater that could barely maintain 15 frames per second. I kept it sitting on my desk for months. I was occasionally using it for basic web browsing, but mostly it just collected dust while I saved up for something better. By late summer of that same year, I'd finally had enough. I was tired of looking at this expensive paperweight, and I figured if I could get some cash for it, I could put that toward building a proper desktop rig. So I took some decent photos, wrote up an honest description of the specs, and posted it on one of those online marketplace apps. So I set the price at $300, which seemed fair given its condition and the fact that it was barely a year old. The responses started coming in almost immediately, but most of them were clearly automated garbage. You know the type: broken English, asking me to ship it overseas, obvious scam attempts. I deleted probably 20 messages in the first 2 days. Then, on the third day, I got a message that seemed legitimate. The profile belonged to someone named Richard, and his message was straightforward and polite. He asked if the laptop was still available and requested the full specifications. I responded right away with all the details, and we started chatting back and forth. Richard told me he lived about an hour's drive north of my town, and he seemed genuinely interested. We negotiated a bit on the price, and I eventually agreed to drop it at $250 just to get the sale done. When he suggested we meet the following afternoon at a Burger King off the highway, right at the halfway point between us. 2 o'clock, he said. I agreed immediately. It was a public place, middle of the day, seemed perfectly safe. The next morning, Richard sent me another message with a description of his vehicle so I could spot him in the parking lot. He said he'd be driving a silver cargo van. I remember pausing when I read that, feeling a tiny flutter of unease in my stomach. A cargo van seemed like an odd choice for a personal vehicle, but I quickly rationalized it away. Maybe he used it for work, maybe it was a family vehicle, maybe he was helping someone move. People drive all kinds of vehicles, right? And besides, I really needed that money. I was so close to having enough for the desktop I wanted. That afternoon, I packed the laptop carefully in its original box, made sure I had the charger and all the accessories, and drove to the Burger King. I arrived about 10 minutes early and sat in my car for a bit, watching the parking lot. Right at 2 o'clock, a silver cargo van pulled in and parked a few spaces away from me. I grabbed the laptop box and headed inside, figuring it would be safer to do the transaction indoors where there were other people around. The restaurant was moderately busy, a few families, some teenagers, an elderly couple in a corner booth. I ordered a small drink just to have something to do with my hands. And then I saw Richard wave at me from a table near the windows. He was easy to spot since I was the only person carrying a laptop box. I walked over and sat down across from him. Richard appeared to be in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. He had thinning dark hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and was wearing a button-down shirt that looked slightly too formal for a casual weekend meetup. He smiled as I sat down, and I slid the laptop box across the table. He opened it carefully and pulled out the laptop, setting it on the table between us. "Mind if I test it out for a few minutes?" he asked. "Just want to make sure everything works as described." "Of course," I said. "Take your time." He powered it on and started clicking around, opening various programs in Windows. I sat there scrolling through my phone, trying not to hover too much. After about 10 minutes, he looked up at me. "So the price was $250, correct?" he asked. "That's right," I confirmed. He nodded and went back to examining the laptop. Then he started talking, telling me about himself without me really asking. He said he was a music instructor at a middle school in his town, and that he needed a personal laptop for organizing his lesson plans and storing audio files for his classes. It struck me as slightly odd. Most schools provided computers for their teachers, and in 2019, most people just stream music online anyway. But I didn't say anything. I just wanted to complete the sale. Then Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB flash drive. He held it up briefly, as if showing it to me, and said, "Do you mind if I test the USB ports? Want to make sure they're working properly." "Sure, go ahead," I said. He plugged the flash drive into the laptop and started clicking around. From my angle across the table, I couldn't really see the screen clearly. I could see his eyes moving back and forth like he was reading something or navigating through files, but the laptop's screen was tilted away from me. This went on for maybe 5 minutes, and I started getting impatient. I'd already been there for almost 20 minutes at this point. Finally, Richard looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "So," he said slowly, "what exactly do you want me to do?" The question caught me completely off guard, and I had no idea what he was talking about. "I'm sorry," I said. "What do you mean?" He just stared at me for a moment, then closed the laptop with a soft click. "You know what?" he said, standing up abruptly. "I don't think this is quite what I'm looking for after all. Thanks for your time." And just like that, he walked out. He left the laptop sitting there on the table and headed straight for the door without looking back. I sat there stunned for a few seconds, trying to process what had just happened. Then I quickly packed up the laptop and watched through the window as he got into a silver van and drove away. I was confused and frustrated, but mostly I was just annoyed that I'd wasted my afternoon. I decided to grab some food since I was already there, and then I headed home. But during the drive back, my mind kept returning to the whole bizarre interaction. Something about it felt wrong. That strange question he'd asked, "What do you want me to do?" kept echoing in my head. What had he meant by that? When I got home, I decided to do a little investigating. Richard had mentioned he was a music teacher at a middle school in his town. He'd even mentioned the name of the school, though I'm not going to repeat it here. I pulled up the school's website and navigated to the staff directory. I scrolled through every single name, looking for anyone named Richard who taught music. Nothing. I expanded my search to include all staff members. Still nothing. There was no one at that school who matched the name he'd given me. That's when the unease I'd felt earlier came rushing back, much stronger this time. Why would he lie about where he worked? Why would he make up such a specific, verifiable detail? Then another thought hit me, and my blood ran cold. That USB drive. What had he actually been doing when he plugged it in? I immediately grabbed the laptop and ran a full system scan with my antivirus software. The scan took almost an hour, and I sat there the entire time with my stomach in knots, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. When it finished, the results made my hands start shaking. The antivirus had detected and quarantined a tracking program. Someone had installed spyware on my laptop, software designed to monitor my location, probably by tracking the laptop's IP address and GPS if it had it. The timestamp showed it had been installed that afternoon, right around the time Richard had been testing the USB ports. I felt sick. This man had deliberately installed tracking software on my laptop. He'd planned this from the beginning. That's why he'd brought the flash drive. That's why he'd insisted on testing the laptop. And now I understood his cryptic question. What do you want me to do? He'd been asking what I wanted him to do with the information he was planning to gather. He'd assumed I was somehow in on it. Or maybe he was testing to see if I'd notice what he was doing. I spent the next hour thoroughly cleaning the laptop, running multiple scans with different programs to make absolutely sure the tracking software was completely removed. Then I started thinking about the implications. This man knew my name from the Marketplace app. He probably knew the general area where I lived, and he tried to install software that would let him track my exact location. I barely slept that night. I kept getting up to check that all the doors and windows were locked. I pulled a baseball bat out of my closet and kept it next to my bed. Every sound outside made me jump. The next morning, I called a home security company and scheduled an installation for that same day. I didn't care what it cost. I paid extra to have them come out immediately. The security system helped me feel a little safer, but the paranoia lingered for weeks. I stopped using that Marketplace app entirely. I factory reset the laptop and eventually sold it to a friend of a friend, someone I actually knew and trusted. And I started being much more careful about meeting strangers from the internet. It's been several years now, and I still think about that afternoon sometimes. I wonder what Richard's actual intentions were. Was he planning to rob me after tracking where I lived? Was it something worse? I'll never know for sure, and honestly, I'm glad I don't. So to the man who tried to install spyware on my laptop in that Burger King parking lot, let's not meet again, ever.